The Las Vegas Strip, that glittering serpent of excess and illusion, stretched out under a starless sky on October 1st, 2017. Thousands had gathered at the Route 91 Harvest Festival, their voices rising in harmony with the strumming guitars and heartfelt ballads, a temporary escape from the grind of everyday life. Jason Aldean was deep into his final set, the crowd of roughly 22,000 swaying to the rhythm, beers in hand and worries forgotten, when the first cracks shattered the night. Sharp, insistent pops that cut through the music like a knife through silk. Those weren't fireworks. Not in this city of spectacles. They were the opening salvos of something far darker, transforming a celebration into a battlefield and forcing revelers to confront the fragility of their assumed safety in an instant. From high above, in a 32 non-floor suite at the Mandalay Bay, 64-year-old Stephen Paddock had positioned himself like a shadow in the eaves, unleashing more than 1,000 rounds over approximately 10 to 11 agonizing minutes, each bullet a thread in a tapestry of unimaginable horror. The air filled with the acrid scent of gunpowder, mixing with spilled drinks and fierce sweat, as screams replaced songs and bodies hit the ground. The festival grounds turning into a chaotic labyrinth under the flashing lights of the surrounding casinos. Dozens fell instantly, their lives snuffed out amid the stampede, while hundreds more clutched wounds that would scar both flesh and spirit, marking this as the deadliest modern mass shooting in U.S. history, a grim milestone etched in blood on the neon-lit pavement. Confusion reigned supreme in those frantic moments. Witnesses reported shots echoing from multiple directions, simultaneous bursts that suggested not one source, but a symphony of terror, with confusing vehicle movements adding to the disorienting fog of panic. The night pulsed with the staccato rhythm of gunfire, blending into the thrum of fleeing footsteps and distant sirens, a sensory overload that blurred the line between reality and nightmare, leaving survivors to question every shadow and sound in the ensuing silence. It's the echo of those divergent reports that lingers like an unresolved chord, challenging the notion of a solitary perpetrator and whispering of complexities yet to be unraveled in the official narrative. Police officers, those weary guardians of the Strip's fragile order, scrambled through the crowds, their radios crackling with urgent dispatches as they strained to pinpoint the origin of the barrage, dodging the invisible rain of lead that turned heroes into targets. In the glow of emergency lights and the haze of dust kicked up by desperate escapes, the initial response unfolded like a desperate chess game against an unseen opponent, highlighting the vulnerabilities of even the most fortified entertainment empires. That frenzied hunt exposed the raw underbelly of crisis management, where every second stretched into eternity and the weight of potential failure pressed down like the desert heat, forever altering the calculus of public safety in America's playground. Roughly an hour after the attack erupted, tactical teams finally breached Paddock's suite, the door giving way to a scene straight out of a fever dream. Arsenals of firearms scattered amid the luxury trappings, and the shooter himself sprawled lifeless from an apparently self-inflicted gunshot wound. The room reeked of cordite and isolation, high above the chaos he'd wrought, with views that once promised glamour, now framing the devastation below. A stark contrast to the vibrant festival that had pulsed with life just moments before. Discovering him there, alone with his cache of death, planted the seed of the central mystery. A lone gunman, acting without clear motive. His final act, a punctuation mark on a rampage that begged questions about the shadows lurking in ordinary souls. As the echoes of gunfire faded into the night, the city that never sleeps found itself wide awake in horror. The festival grounds, littered with remnants of joy, turned to tragedy. A testament to the sudden brutality that can shatter illusions of invincibility. Stephen Paddock, an unassuming figure from the suburbs, had orchestrated this symphony of destruction from his perch. His background a blank canvas that investigators would soon scrub for clues, yet yielding little to explain the abyss that drove him. In the undercurrent of neon and despair, the air hung heavy with unspoken fears as concertgoers huddled in hiding spots, their breaths shallow against the backdrop of ongoing volleys. Each pause pregnant with the dread of resumption. This was no random act, but a calculated descent into madness, unfolding in a place built on chance and spectacle, forcing a reckoning with how thin the veil between festivity and fatality truly is. The scale of it all, the sheer volume of rounds, the breadth of panic, painted a picture of orchestrated apocalypse, one that would haunt the survivors and puzzle the experts long after the last shell casing was collected. Yet amid the wreckage, the human spirit flickered, strangers shielding one another in the dirt, their acts of courage, a faint light against the encroaching darkness that Paddock had unleashed from his elevated lair. As dawn crept over the horizon, illuminating the scarred landscape, the questions began to mount. How does a man like Paddock amass such an arsenal undetected? And what voids in his life propelled him to this precipice? The Route 91 Harvest Festival, once a beacon of communal joy, now stood as a somber memorial in the making. Its legacy forever tied to that October night when gunfire rewrote the rules of gathering in peace. We left off amid the raw pandemonium of that fateful night. The crack of gunfire slicing through the music, lives shattered in an instant, and a crowd of thousands scattering like shadows in the neon glow. But to understand how such a nightmare unfolded, we need to step back, rewind the tape to the days before October 1st, 2017, and paint the scene of Las Vegas in all its glittering excess. The Route 91 Harvest Festival kicked off on September 29th and ran through October 1st. A 3-day extravaganza of twangy guitars and heartfelt ballads that transformed the dusty lot on the Las Vegas Strip into a sprawling haven for country music fans. In the thick heat of early fall, with the desert sun dipping low and casting long shadows over the festival grounds, attendees poured in from across the country, their boots kicking up dust amid the thrum of bass lines and the scent of barbecue smoke wafting through the air. This wasn't just any weekend gathering. It was the closing stretch of an event that had become a ritual for tens of thousands. A place where worries dissolved into choruses and cold beers, yet one that unwittingly set the stage for an unimaginable rupture in the fabric of normalcy. Jason Aldean was slated to headline the final night, his set promising the kind of high-energy performance that would cap off the festival with fireworks and anthems, drawing crowds eager for that last hurrah under the stars. The grounds buzzed with anticipation, laughter echoing off temporary fences while vendors hawked glowing memorabilia, and the distant hum of traffic on the strip blended with warm-up acts, creating a symphony of carefree abandon in a city built on fleeting dreams. Aldine's presence amplified the event's allure, pulling in fans who saw it as more than music. It was a communal escape, though in hindsight, it highlighted the fragile illusion of safety amid such massive, open-air revelry. Overlooking it all stood the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino, a monolithic tower of gold-tinted glass rising 43 stories high, its windows reflecting the chaos and color below like indifferent eyes. Owned and operated by MGM Resorts International, this behemoth wasn't just a hotel. It was a self-contained universe of slot machines, clinking, high rollers whispering deals in dimly lit lounges, and the perpetual haze of cigarette smoke mingling with the aroma of overpriced cocktails. Its position on the south end of the Strip placed the 32nd floor in eerie proximity to the festival grounds, a mere stone's throw away in urban terms, fostering a deceptive sense of oversight that would later prove tragically insufficient. Las Vegas in 2017 was the epitome of spectacle, a city where large-scale events like Route 91 were routine, with security protocols layered like the odds in a poker game, metal detectors at entrances, bag checks, and patrols weaving through the throng. The air shimmered with the energy of tens of thousands converging, their voices rising in waves over the amplified strums, while logistics hummed in the background. Shuttles ferrying people, vendors restocking, and event staff coordinating in the dim glow of control tents. Yet beneath this veneer of controlled chaos lurked an oversight that chills the blood. The spatial intimacy between the festival's vulnerable sprawl and Mandalay Bay's elevated perch. A gap that no amount of ground-level vigilance could fully bridge. MGM Resorts International had invested in state-of-the-art security for their properties, including surveillance cameras blanketing the casino floors and hallways, trained personnel monitoring feeds around the clock, and protocols for everything from petty theft to medical emergencies. In the opulent corridors of Mandalay Bay, the atmosphere was one of calculated luxury, with marble floors echoing under footsteps and the faint jingle of coins from the gaming areas below. All under the watchful gaze of an invisible network designed to protect guests and profits alike. This infrastructure implied a fortress-like assurance, but it also underscored a critical blind spot: how such systems, focused inward, left the external panorama of the festival exposed. A vulnerability that would echo through the investigations to come. The festival itself drew tens of thousands for its closing weekend, a sea of cowboy hats and denim swelling the grounds each night, turning a vacant lot into a temporary city of sound and light. As dusk fell, the neon skyline ignited, blending with stage lights that pulsed like heartbeats, and the crowd's collective energy built a wall of noise against the encroaching desert night. A testament to the human need for connection in a transient town. That massive turnout not only celebrated the spirit of the event, but also amplified the stakes, revealing how the sheer scale of attendance could transform joy into a potential catastrophe. A truth that authorities would grapple with in the aftermath. From the perspectives of attendees, it was paradise. Friends linking arms, strangers sharing stories, all oblivious to the shadow looming from above. Authorities, meanwhile, operated under the norms of Vegas event management, where threats were anticipated from the ground up, not from a high-floor suite with a view that turned oversight into oversight. It's this architectural irony that pierces the heart of the prelude, a towering sentinel meant to symbolize security, yet positioned to enable the very breach it overlooked. As we set this stage, the pieces align for what comes next. The quiet arrival of Stephen Paddock, his calculated movements through Mandalay Bay, and the ominous buildup on that 32nd floor. As the neon glow of Las Vegas pulsed against the desert night, and the Route 91 Harvest Festival geared up for its final raucous weekend in late September 2017, one man was already positioning himself like a shadow in the spotlight. We just unpacked the sprawling energy of that festival grounds, the crowd swelling under the casino lights, unaware of the storm brewing high above. Now, let's trace the footsteps of Stephen Paddock, the ghost in the machine, as he methodically carved out his perch. According to the official reports from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, Paddock checked into the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino on September 25th, 2017, securing room 32135, a suite on the 32nd floor with windows that stared straight down onto the festival site across the strip. The hotel lobby thrummed with the chatter of tourists and the clink of slot machines, the air thick with cigarette smoke and the faint buzz of anticipation for the weekend's country music revelry, while Paddock, unassuming in his casual attire, slipped through the crowds like a forgotten dealer at a blackjack table. This choice of room wasn't random. It positioned him as an overseer, a vantage point that transformed the joyful chaos below into a calculated field of fire, hinting at a preparation that went beyond mere coincidence. Hotel records and surveillance footage confirm his presence, capturing him moving with purposeful discretion through the corridors, his luggage carts heavy with unseen burdens. As the days ticked toward October 1st, the 32nd floor hallways echoed with the muffled laughter from nearby rooms and the distant hum of elevators, a world of luxury suites where high rollers escaped the desert heat. Yet Paddock's steps were measured, almost invisible amid the opulent normalcy. Such meticulous tracking by the hotel's eyes in the sky underscores how his isolation was self-imposed, a deliberate veil that allowed his plans to unfold without interruption, raising questions about the solitude that breeds such darkness. By September 30th, extending into October 1st, Paddock had arranged or occupied the adjacent room 32134, connected through an internal door, effectively expanding his domain into a fortified lair overlooking the festival's closing acts. The scent of room service trays lingered in the air, mixed with the faint metallic tang of whatever he was assembling behind those closed doors, as the bass from the concert below vibrated through the glass, oblivious to the threat dangling above. This adjacency wasn't just convenience, it created a web of control, allowing him to maneuver between spaces, a tactical expansion that amplified his reach and complicated any potential response, revealing a mind attuned to the architecture of ambush. Inside these rooms, investigators later recovered an arsenal of firearms, many equipped with bump stock devices that modified semi-automatic rifles to mimic the rapid fire of automatics, smuggled in piece by piece over those fateful days. The suite's plush carpets muffled the sounds of unpacking, the weighty clicks of metal on metal echoing softly against walls adorned with generic art. While outside, the festival's lights danced like fireflies against the encroaching night. These modifications spoke to a premeditated efficiency, transforming legal weapons into instruments of mass havoc, a loophole exploited in secrecy that exposed the fragility of safeguards in a city built on risk. Paddock went further, rigging surveillance cameras in the hallway and on a room service cart to monitor approaches, their lenses capturing the mundane comings and goings of hotel staff. A digital sentinel system wired with cold precision. The faint glow of screens illuminated the dim room, casting eerie shadows on the minibar and rumpled bedsheets, as the distant roar of the crowd provided a soundtrack to his vigilant watch. The festival's energy a stark contrast to his isolated vigilance. This setup wasn't paranoia. It was a calculated defense, ensuring no interruption to his timeline, a layer of security that prolonged his window of opportunity and deepened the tragedy's inevitability. He even modified the windows, positioning tools and stands to shatter the glass for unobstructed lines of sight, preparations hidden behind drawn curtains as the sun set on September's end. The glass panes, thick and tinted against the Nevada glare, reflected the glittering strip below, where festival-goers swayed to the music, their laughter carried on the warm breeze that barely penetrated the sealed suite. Such alterations betrayed a foresight that turned a hotel room into a sniper's nest, a transformation so thorough it challenges any notion of impulsivity, embedding his actions in a web of deliberate intent. It's this seamless integration of adjacent rooms and hidden tech that unravels the illusion of a lone actor's spontaneity, exposing a blueprint too intricate for chance alone. All the while, the Route 91 festival barreled towards its climax, the closing weekend drawing thousands into the open lot. Their excitement, an unwitting counterpoint to Paddock's shadowy orchestration high above. The air outside hummed with guitar riffs and cheering voices, the scent of street food wafting up from the grounds, as Paddock's preparations synced perfectly with the event's rhythm. A countdown hidden in plain sight. This alignment wasn't accidental. It amplified the scale of what was to come, turning a celebration into a target and underscoring how vulnerability lurks in the heart of festivity. We've mapped the build-up, the quiet accumulation of dread in those gilded halls. Next, we step into the chaos, unraveling the massacre moment by moment. From the crack of the first shot to the breach of that fortified door, amid the screams and the swirling confusion below. The neon glow of Las Vegas had settled into its usual rhythm that night. October 1st, as the Route 91 Harvest Festival pulsed with the energy of thousands gathered under the stars. We traced Stephen Paddock's meticulous preparations, his arsenal growing in those shadowed hotel suites. But now, the clock was ticking towards something irreversible. Around 9:59 p.m., the crowd swayed to the opening notes of Jason Aldean's final set, his guitar strumming through the warm desert air, laced with the scent of beer and anticipation. This was the fact of the evening's peak, the music drawing everyone closer. Yet, it masked the storm brewing high above, in the Mandalay Bay's 32nd floor. By 10:05 p.m., or perhaps as early as 9:59 according to those initial LVMPD statements that would later shift like sand in the wind, the first barrage erupted. Paddock, perched in his dual suites, smashed the windows with a hammer, unleashing hundreds of rounds into the unsuspecting sea below, the muzzle flashes cutting through the night like distant lightning. The atmosphere down there was electric at first, fans cheering Aldean's hits, but then the sharp cracks pierced the melody, echoing off the surrounding buildings in a disorienting cacophony. Witnesses described gunfire seeming to come from all directions. overlapping bursts that blurred the line between reality and nightmare, implying a chaos so profound it sowed seeds of doubt about a lone assailant. Minute by minute, the terror unfolded, with Paddock's rifles barking relentlessly from those broken panes, rounds raining down on the festival grounds, where screams now drowned out the music. The sensory overload was total, acrid smoke drifting in the breeze, the ground vibrating with impacts, and in that maelstrom, the true scale of vulnerability became achingly clear. A reminder of how fragile crowds can be in the face of calculated malice. Up on the 32nd floor, amid this frenzy, hotel security guard Jesus Campos was drawn to the 100-wing corridor by reports of an open door, or perhaps a maintenance glitch. His footsteps echoing in the carpeted hallway. He arrived just as the shooting commenced, or so the evolving timelines suggest, and a bullet struck his leg, leaving him wounded and radioing for help, which underscored the peril extending even beyond the crowd below. The official reports on Campus's wounding shifted over time, first placing it before the main barrage and then aligning it closer to the start. A revision that echoes through the investigation like an unanswered question. In the dim light of the corridor, blood staining the floor, this detail highlights the fog of crisis, where every second's accounting carries the weight of accountability and truth. Down on the ground, the auditory chaos amplified the horror, with rapid gunfire overlapping in ways that made it sound like multiple sources. Witnesses fleeing in all directions amid the flashing stage lights and falling bodies. This wasn't just sound. It was a symphony of dread, implying a breakdown in perception that would fuel rumors and confusion long after the shots ceased. By 10:10 p.m., the carnage was mounting. Bodies strewn across the venue as Aldane's band fled the stage, the air thick with dust and a metallic tang of blood. Paddock sustained fire. Hundreds of rounds over those interminable minutes painted a picture of premeditated devastation, forcing us to confront the depths of one man's capacity for destruction. Radio dispatches crackled with urgency, officers reporting shots from various hotel floors and even other properties, their voices laced with adrenaline and uncertainty. In that heated exchange, the fact of conflicting reports emerged, set against the backdrop of a city in lockdown, revealing how panic can multiply threats in the mind's eye. Evacuation attempts began haphazardly, concert-goers trampling barriers under the strobe of emergency lights, while first responders pushed through the melee. This rush to safety, amid ongoing volleys, spoke to the raw instinct for survival, yet it also exposed the logistical nightmare of managing terror on such a scale. Around 10:17 p.m., the first LVMPD officers reached the 32 ND floor stairwell, their boots pounding the steps, hearts racing in the confined space, heavy with the scent of gunpowder. They arrived under intense pressure, coordinating breaches while the shooting persisted, a testament to bravery that nonetheless couldn't halt the immediate tide of suffering. The barrage lasted roughly 10 to 11 minutes, an eternity compressed into a blur of horror, with Paddock's weapons finally falling silent around 10:16 p.m. In the echoing aftermath, the festival grounds resembled a war zone, the air still humming with distant sirens, implying wounds that would scar not just bodies, but the collective psyche. This sequence of events, from Aldane's last chords to the officer's arrival, captures the essence of those 10 minutes of terror, where auditory illusions and spatial disarray created a labyrinth of fear. It's in these details that we see the human cost, the trauma etched into survivors' memories like graffiti on a shattered window. And yet, amid the facts laid bare, there's a lingering discord in the timelines, particularly around Campus's encounter. A misalignment that challenges the seamless narrative authorities presented. It gnaws at the edges of certainty, suggesting layers yet to be peeled back in this dark tale. The scale of the carnage was staggering, with hundreds wounded and lives irrevocably altered in that brief window. The desert night, once alive with celebration, now carried the weight of profound loss, forcing a reckoning with vulnerabilities we prefer to ignore. As the final echoes faded, the confusion only deepened, setting the stage for the chaotic hours that followed. But that's a thread we'll pick up next, unraveling the immediate aftermath and the shifting stories that emerged from the smoke. The gunfire had ceased by 10:16 p.m., or so the initial reports claimed, leaving behind a haze of cordite and confusion that clung to the corridors of the Mandalay Bay like a persistent fog. In those tense moments, as the echoes faded into the Nevada night, teams of LVMPD officers and hotel security scrambled to evacuate the 32nd floor, their boots thudding against carpeted halls amid the distant wail of sirens, a frantic ballet of flashlights cutting through the dim emergency lighting. Yet, even as they moved room by room, ushering terrified guests towards stairwells slick with spilled drinks and abandoned belongings, some officers and witnesses noted an eerie silence. No sustained bursts of gunfire ripping through the air, just the occasional pop that could have been mistaken for fireworks or a slamming door. This absence, in the thick of what felt like an unending nightmare, planted seeds of doubt about whether the threat had truly ended or if something more insidious lurked in the shadows. By 10:55 p.m., the LVMPD had shifted into a full tactical posture, announcing over crackling radios that they were searching for the shooter, or shooters, amid the sprawling complex. Their voices edged with the raw adrenaline of the unknown. The neon glow of the strip below pulsed indifferently, a stark contrast to the darkened halls where armored teams advanced with weapons drawn, the air heavy with the metallic tang of fear and resolve. This declaration wasn't just procedure. It underscored the initial belief in a possible multi-perpetrator scenario, a paranoia born from the chaos that would later fuel endless speculation about accomplices never found. The coordination between LVMPD, Mandalay Bay Security, and arriving paramedics was a whirlwind of mismatched timelines and urgent whispers, with hotel guards relaying partial intel through handheld radios that buzzed with static, while medics in blood-stained gear pushed gurneys past shattered glass. In this maelstrom, witness accounts clashed, some swearing to bursts of gunfire during the sweeps, others insisting the halls had fallen silent, a discrepancy that hinted at the fog of trauma warping perceptions in real time. Such confusion eroded trust from the outset, suggesting that the official narrative was already fracturing under the weight of human error and panic. Then came the explosive breach of room 32135 around 11:20 to 11:30 p.m., SWAT teams detonating charges that reverberated through the building like thunder. The acrid smoke billowing out as they stormed in with shields raised and hearts pounding. Inside, amidst the scattered shell casings and the oppressive heat of fired weapons, they discovered Stephen Paddock's body, slumped with what appeared to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound, his arsenal silent now in the flickering strobe of tactical lights. This grim tableau, frozen in the aftermath of unimaginable violence, raised immediate questions about how long he had lain there, and whether the end came before or after the last evacuations. A timing puzzle that would haunt investigators for months. As the clock ticked into the early hours of October 2nd, nationwide media coverage exploded. Networks broadcasting live from the bloodied concert grounds where survivors huddled under stadium lights, their faces etched with shock and dust. Reporters dissected witness accounts and emerging timelines, pressing officials for details amid the cacophony of helicopter rotors and flashing cameras. This relentless scrutiny amplified every inconsistency, turning public bewilderment into a growing chorus of skepticism as the story unfolded in real time. MGM and LVMPD issued their first public statements, terse releases typed out in sterile press rooms that smelled of coffee and exhaustion, promising transparency while revising internal logs that contradicted initial reports. These adjustments, particularly around the timing of events on the 32nd floor, weren't mere clerical errors. They chipped away at the foundation of credibility, leaving observers to wonder what else might be quietly rewritten. Central to the evolving doubts was the shooting of security guard Jesus Campos, whose reported injury time-shifted in official accounts from moments before the massacre to a timeline that placed it earlier. Amid the opulent quiet of the hotel's upper levels, survivors recounted his bravery in fragmented whispers. But the discrepancies in when he was hit, 6 minutes before the shooting started, per later revisions, clashed with radio logs and body cam footage that trickled out piecemeal. It was this revision, more than any other, that unraveled the seamless thread of the official sequence, exposing gaps that no explanation could fully mend. Broader public reaction swelled like a desert storm, with survivors in shock wandering the strip, their clothes torn and eyes hollow, sharing stories on social media that raced ahead of official briefings. The seedbed of skepticism took root here, watered by partially released footage and whispered theories in online forums, where the shifting timelines bred accusations of cover-ups and incompetence. In those raw, immediate hours, as the city that never sleeps grappled with a wound that refused to heal, the discrepancies weren't just footnotes. They were fissures in the very story of what happened, inviting us all to question the darkness that lingered beyond the facts. We've traced the chaotic echoes from the final shots to the first cracks in the narrative, where evacuations blurred into discoveries and statements that bent under scrutiny. Next, we'll delve into the opening phase of the investigation, early suspicions, initial evidence collection, and how law enforcement began piecing together the scene in the harsh light of day. In the shadowed aftermath of that fateful night, with the echoes of gunfire still ringing through the neon-lit corridors of Las Vegas, the investigation lurched into motion like a reluctant engine sputtering to life. Investigators descended upon the Mandalay Bay, their flashlights cutting through the haze of cordite and confusion, determined to unravel the chaos that had unfolded on the 32nd floor. They started with the rooms themselves, 32, 135, and 32, 134. Those adjoining suites where Stephen Paddock had barricaded himself, transforming luxury accommodations into a makeshift arsenal. The air inside was thick with the metallic tang of spent shells and the faint, acrid scent of gun oil, a stark contrast to the opulent decor that now lay shattered and strewn about. Forensic teams meticulously catalogued the cache, Long guns stacked like forgotten relics, boxes of ammunition piled high, and improvised devices that hinted at a premeditated siege. This wasn't just a room. It was a fortress of malice, built in the heart of a city that never sleeps, raising questions about how such an arsenal could assemble under the watchful eyes of hotel security. The implication hung heavy. If evil could prepare so thoroughly in plain sight, what blind spots lingered in our so-called vigilant society, allowing a man to amass death without a whisper of alarm? Ballistic experts soon took center stage, mapping hundreds of rounds fired from those very rooms, tracing trajectories that pierced the night sky and rained down on the crowd below. In the sterile labs far from the Strip's glittering facade, analysts pored over bullet fragments under harsh fluorescent lights, each piece a grim puzzle linking back to Paddock's rifles. The context was one of cold precision amid the desert heat, where science met savagery, confirming the suites as the origin of the majority of the fire that turned a concert into a killing field. Yet this mapping, so exact and unforgiving, only deepened the mystery of motive, as if the bullets themselves carried no message beyond destruction. And therein lay the rub. With every matched casing, the lone gunman theory solidified. But it left a void where reasons should be, forcing us to confront the terrifying notion that some horrors defy explanation, emerging from the shadows without warning or rhyme. Surveillance footage became the next thread in this tangled web, with hotel cameras and key records placing Paddock unequivocally in those rooms, his movements captured in grainy black and white like a ghost haunting the halls. The tapes rolled back through days of unremarkable activity, but in the flickering glow of monitors, investigators watched him wheel in bags heavy with intent, the city's perpetual hum, providing an ironic soundtrack to his solitary preparations. This digital evidence, pulled from servers humming in air-conditioned vaults, painted a picture of isolation in a place built for crowds, underscoring how anonymity thrives even amid the bustle. The implication was chilling. A man could vanish into plain view, his actions unseen until they exploded into violence, challenging our faith in technology's all-seeing eye. Authorities clung to the lone gunman narrative from the outset, scouring for any manifesto or ideological claim that might explain the madness, but found only silence. No accomplices emerged from the woodwork. No hidden networks or whispered conspiracies, just a stark reality of one man's descent in an era where mass shootings had become a grim fixture of American life. The atmosphere was one of frustrated scrutiny, with press rooms buzzing under the glare of Klieg lights as officials reiterated the absence of leads, their words echoing hollowly against the backdrop of a grieving nation. This void implied a deeper unease, suggesting that not all darkness stems from grand plots, but sometimes from the quiet rot within a single soul. Enter the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit, tasked with constructing a profile over the ensuing year, delving into Paddock's psyche through interviews and records. Their work unfolded in dimly lit offices, far from the crime scene. Analysts sifting through financial trails and personal histories, like detectives in a psychological thriller, piecing together a portrait of alienation. In the context of post-event reviews, amid the political pressures of a divided country, this unit's efforts highlighted the limits of understanding evil after the fact. The implication was profound. If even experts couldn't fully map the mind's abyss, how could prevention ever outpace such unpredictable storms? Complications arose with the redacted footage and incomplete body cam releases, fragments of truth withheld under the guise of protocol, leaving survivors and independent analysts to fume in the dim glow of their screens. The air in online forums crackled with suspicion, as partial disclosures fueled theories that danced on the edge of paranoia. This opacity, in a time when transparency was demanded like oxygen, created a rift that no official statement could bridge. It was this deliberate veil over the visuals that eroded trust in the narrative's very foundation, whispering doubts into every unanswered question. Family cooperation came through Eric Paddock, Stephen's brother, who stepped forward with weary candor, sharing insights with investigators and media alike. His voice, strained over phone lines and in crowded press conferences, painted a picture of a distant relative whose life had veered into enigma, the Florida humidity contrasting sharply with Vegas's dry winds. In this familiar lens, amid the personal grief that no spotlight could soften, Eric's input humanized the monster, yet implied the tragic isolation that family ties couldn't pierce. How does one reckon with blood that runs cold without warning? Then there was Steve Shuck, the Mandalay Bay maintenance worker, whose eyewitness account cut through the haze like a siren. He recounted the bullets whizzing past on the 32nd floor, his tools clattering to the ground in the dim emergency lighting, providing a crucial timeline that anchored the chaos. The context was visceral, echoes in the hallway, the scent of fear sweat mixing with carpet cleaner. An ordinary shift turned nightmare. This testimony implied the randomness of survival. A reminder that heroes emerge not from plans, but from the raw instinct to endure. As the pieces came together, the investigation revealed a puzzle with edges sharp enough to cut, but a center that remained frustratingly blank. No grand conspiracy, just the solitary echo of one man's rage, leaving us to ponder the shadows that linger when the lights come back on. In the shadowed aftermath of that fateful night, as we peeled back the layers of the early investigation, uncovering Paddock's arsenal, tracing his ghostly presence through the Mandalay Bay, and watching the FBI launch their behavioral autopsy amid trickles of evidence, the real storm was just brewing. The official response, you see, became a labyrinth of statements and revisions, a desperate bid to manage a crisis that swelled under the relentless scrutiny of a nation in shock. At the heart of it stood Sheriff Joseph Lombardo of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, his voice cutting through the din of press conferences like a foghorn in the neon haze of the Strip. Lombardo issued those early timelines, piecing together the chaos with what seemed like ironclad certainty, only to revise them as new details emerged from the debris-strewn hallways and bullet-riddled suites. The air in those briefings hung heavy with the scent of burnt coffee and urgency, the flickering lights of cameras casting long shadows on faces etched with exhaustion. It was October 2017, a time when Vegas, usually a playground of illusions, found itself stripped bare under the glare of tragedy. These shifts weren't mere corrections. They chipped away at public trust, suggesting that the narrative of a lone gunman, which Lombardo defended with a steely resolve, might be more fragile than the official line allowed, inviting whispers of deeper secrets buried in the official reports. Then there were MGM Resorts International's internal logs, those manual entries scribbled in the heat of the moment, revealing discrepancies in timestamps that didn't quite sync with the police accounts. Picture the control rooms alive with the buzz of radios and the glow of monitors, security teams navigating a hotel empire amid the echoes of gunfire that night, in an era where corporate giants like MGM balanced profit with peril in the glittering underbelly of Sin City. These mismatches fueled debates about their security protocols and communication failures, implying that in the rush to contain the horror, crucial minutes were misaligned, potentially delaying responses that could have altered the night's grim toll. MGM later revised or clarified those log times, but the damage lingered, a revision that only deepened the skepticism swelling around their handling of the crisis. High-profile press reconstructions piled on, with outlets like the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, NPR, and CNN dissecting the timelines, their reporters sifting through transcripts and footage in dimly lit newsrooms filled with the clatter of keyboards and the murmur of urgent debates. In the months following the shooting, as autumn leaves fell far from the desert heat, these investigations highlighted inconsistencies that refused to reconcile. From the exact moment security guard Jesus Campos encountered Paddock to the breach of the suite door. Such revelations didn't just inform, they ignited public questioning, eroding the foundations of the official story and birthing theories that spread like wildfire through social media's shadowy corners. And here's the fracture that shatters the timeline's fragile glass. Those unexplained gaps in the sequence, where seconds stretched into minutes without clear accounting, undermining the very rhythm of the response that night. Compounding it all was the delay in releasing body cam and surveillance footage, trickled out in redacted forms long after the public clamored for transparency. The withholding played out against a backdrop of mounting pressure, with families grieving in quiet living rooms, scented with wilting sympathy flowers, while the city pulsed with its usual frenzy, masking the underlying tension of unresolved pain. This partial disclosure only amplified suspicion, hinting at institutional hesitance to expose vulnerabilities that could unravel the carefully curated narrative of control. Litigation pressures mounted, too, with victims pursuing civil suits against MGM, their lawyers poring over documents in high-rise offices, overlooking the Strip's endless lights. Ongoing settlements and public information campaigns emerged as tools to staunch the bleeding. Yet they underscored the broader effort by authorities and corporations to wrest back narrative control from the tide of misinformation and conspiracy theories that flooded online forums and late-night radio waves. In this noir tapestry of half-truths and revisions, the official response wasn't just about managing a crisis. It was a battle for the soul of the story, one that left more questions than answers in its wake. But to truly understand the shadows at play, we must turn our gaze to the central figures themselves. A deep dive into Stephen Paddock's enigmatic profile, his elusive motivations, and the contested role of Jesus Campos, whose public perception remains as fractured as the night itself. In the shadowed corridors of this investigation, where facts twist like smoke from a forgotten cigarette, we turn our gaze to the key figures who anchor the mystery of that fateful night in Las Vegas. Stephen Paddock, the man at the center of the storm, emerges not as a firebrand radical, but as a retired accountant and real estate investor, his life a quiet ledger of calculations and concealed intentions. At 64, Paddock was a high-stakes gambler, haunting the neon-lit casinos of the Strip, where the air hummed with the mechanical symphony of slot machines and the faint scent of desperation mingled with cheap perfume. Yet, in this glittery underworld, he left no trail of extremist affiliations. No manifesto scribbled in rage, no digital footprint of ideology that could explain the carnage. This absence of motive hangs over the case like a perpetual fog, suggesting that the roots of his actions might burrow deeper into a psyche shaped by shadows from his past, forcing us to question whether true understanding can ever pierce such deliberate obscurity. Delving further, we uncover the spectral influence of his father, Benjamin Paddock, a convicted bank robber who once graced the FBI's most wanted list, in the gritty underbelly of 1960s America, where wanted posters fluttered in the wind like forgotten promises, and the scent of gun oil mixed with the dust of endless highways. Benjamin's life of crime, marked by daring escapes and a diagnosis of psychopathy, cast a long shadow over his son's upbringing. A turbulent era of fractured family ties and hidden scars that lingered in the quiet routines of Stephen's later years. This paternal legacy implies a hereditary veil of secrecy and volatility, whispering that Stephen's methodical preparations might echo an inherited flair for evasion, complicating our grasp of how a seemingly ordinary man orchestrated such extraordinary devastation. From the enigma of the shooter, we shift to another pivotal player, Jesus Campos, the Mandalay Bay security guard wounded on the 32nd floor amid the chaos. His footsteps echoing in the sterile hallways, heavy with the acrid smell of gunfire and the distant roar of panic below. Campos, an unassuming figure in the hotel's security detail, became the first to encounter Paddock's wrath. His injury initially reported in the frantic blur of official briefings that unfolded in the pre-dawn haze, where flashing lights cut through the desert night like accusations. Yet this detail, so central to the timeline, reveals a fracture in the narrative that echoes through every subsequent account, hinting at layers of concealment that challenge the very foundation of what we believe happened in those critical minutes. The official story of Campos's shooting underwent revisions, shifting from an initial account of him being hit just before the massacre to a later timeline placing it minutes earlier. In the midst of press conferences thick with the tension of flashing cameras and murmured doubts from the assembled reporters. These changes, announced in the sterile glow of police headquarters, where the air carried the weight of unspoken pressures, fueled speculation and eroded trust, as each adjustment seemed to pull the threads of certainty further apart. Such discrepancies imply a deliberate reshaping of events, perhaps to align with emerging evidence, but they leave us pondering if these alterations mask deeper inconsistencies in the official record. Campos's role thrust him into the glare of national attention, with appearances on television interviews where studio lights bore down like interrogations, and his words were passed in the echo chambers of media scrutiny, often conflicting with dispatch logs and eyewitness recollections. In the midst of civil litigation that followed, his testimony became a linchpin, cited in courtrooms humming with the low buzz of legal arguments and the rustle of documents, where victims' families sought answers amid the lingering scent of unresolved grief. This spotlight suggests that Campos, whether hero or unwitting pawn, holds keys to unraveling the sequence of events. Yet the contradictions in his story amplify the doubts surrounding the lone gunman thesis. Amid these profiles, Eric Paddock, Stephen's brother, stepped forward as the family spokesperson, his voice cracking in press conferences under the relentless Nevada sun, where the heat warped the air and reporters circled like vultures sensing vulnerability. Eric painted a picture of a brother who was private, successful, and utterly unremarkable in his normalcy, far removed from the violent legacy of their father. in an era when family bonds strained against the pull of public judgment. His accounts imply a disconnect between the man he knew and the perpetrator of horror, raising questions about hidden facets of personality that even blood ties could not illuminate. Together, these figures, Paddock with his veiled past, Campos with his contested timeline, form the crux of enduring questions, their stories intersecting in the dim light of that hotel corridor, where the air was thick with cordite and confusion. As we piece together their roles, the atmosphere of Las Vegas that night comes alive, the distant thrum of music from the concert below, suddenly silenced by bursts of gunfire, and the frantic calls over radios crackling with urgency. These elements imply a narrative fraught with gaps, where personal histories and official revisions collide, urging us to probe deeper into the shadows for truths that refuse to surface easily. In contrasting Paddock's secretive life with Campos's contested encounter, we see the broader implications for the attack's legacy. A tapestry woven from biographical threads and evidentiary knots that continue to bind investigators and the public alike. The civil litigation spotlighting Campos's wound, with its stacks of affidavits and the murmur of attorneys in hushed conferences, underscores how these personal stories feed into larger battles for accountability. Ultimately, these profiles remind us that behind the statistics lie human enigmas, their implications rippling through time, challenging the neat conclusions of official reports and leaving us in the perpetual dusk of uncertainty. We've peeled back the layers on Stephen Paddock and Jesus Campos, those two shadows at the heart of the storm, their lives intersecting in a burst of violence that still echoes with unanswered questions. But now, in the dim glow of hindsight, we turn to the contradictions, the anomalies and disputed evidence that twists the official narrative like a knife in the dark. This is where the story frays at the edges, where facts collide and timelines bend under the weight of scrutiny. Early police briefings, delivered in those frantic hours after the gunfire faded, issued revised timelines that shifted like sand in the Nevada wind. What started as a clear sequence of events morphed overnight, with key moments pushed back or forward by minutes that felt like eternities in the chaos of that blood-soaked night. The air in those press rooms hung heavy with the scent of fresh coffee and stale fear. Reporters scribbling notes under fluorescent lights that buzzed like distant gunfire, while officials adjusted their stories to fit emerging details from the Mandalay Bay's glittering facade. These revisions weren't just clerical tweaks. They planted seeds of doubt that grew into thickets of conspiracy, suggesting perhaps a hurried cover-up, or simply the fog of a massacre too vast to map precisely. Yet they linger as thorns in the side of any tidy resolution. Then there were the MGM and LVMPD internal logs, those bureaucratic entrails spilled out in public statements that shifted inconsistently, producing apparent discrepancies that no amount of official clarification could fully smooth over. Picture the sterile glow of computer screens in dimly lit command centers, the click of keyboards echoing through rooms thick with tension, and the metallic tang of cooling electronics. As logs were updated amid the relentless tick of clocks racing against public demand for truth. Such shifts whisper of deeper inconsistencies, fueling debates among survivors who replay that night in their minds, wondering if these logs hide a deliberate rewrite, or merely the inevitable disarray of human error in the face of horror. Radio dispatches crackled through the ether that night, capturing contradictory accounts from officers on the ground, their voices laced with urgency and the distant pop of what sounded like war zone echoes. While citizen videos, shaky and raw, documented scenes that didn't align with the emerging official line. The street below the strip pulsed with sirens and screams, the air thick with gunpowder and panic, as dispatchers fielded calls that painted a picture far messier than any single-shooter script could contain. These recordings and clips stand as stubborn counterpoints, implying a complexity that official reports struggle to encompass. And they keep the questions alive in online forums where analysts dissect every frame for hidden truths. Eyewitnesses, scattered across the festival grounds, reported shots from multiple directions, simultaneous gunfire rattling like thunder from angles that defied a lone gunman's perch. Some swore they heard volleys from the ground level, others from neighboring towers, their testimonies a cacophony amid the fleeing crowds. The night air was alive with the strobe of concert lights cutting through the haze of dust and desperation. Survivors clutching cell phones that captured glimpses of confusion. The ground slick with spilled drinks, and something far worse. It's this multiplicity of origins that erodes the foundation of the sole perpetrator theory. A fracture in the narrative that no forensic reconstruction has fully mended, leaving room for theories that echo louder in the hearts of those who live through it. At the center of it all swirled the controversy over Jesus Campos' shooting, its timing and circumstances relative to the crowd barrage becoming a focal point that refused to fade. Initial reports placed his wound minutes before the main assault, but revisions pushed it after, creating a puzzle that didn't quite fit. In the hushed corridors of the Mandalay Bay, where the carpet muffled footsteps and the air carried the faint hum of slot machines far below, Campos's encounter unfolded in shadows that surveillance cameras should have illuminated but didn't fully reveal. This misalignment in the sequence challenges the entire chronology, a misalignment that pulses like an untreated wound, suggesting either gross oversight or something more sinister buried in the rush to conclude. Amplifying the suspicion were the gaps in the release of body cam and surveillance footage, withheld or redacted pieces that left vast blanks in the visual record. Their absence hanging like smoke in a room where fire had raged unchecked. Investigators pored over grainy feeds in rooms, smelling of takeout and exhaustion, the withheld frames sparking outrage among a public already raw from loss, as if the redactions themselves were admissions of frailty in the system. These omissions feed a hunger for transparency that official narratives can't satisfy, enduring in survivor circles as evidence of a truth partially obscured, much like the chaotic nature of the shooting itself, a whirlwind of terror where certainty was the first casualty. Yet, in framing these discrepancies, we must acknowledge the bedlam of a major mass shooting, where adrenaline warps perceptions and timelines blur in the haze of survival. Still, these anomalies persist, whispered in endless debates and survivor testimonies, refusing to be silenced by time. It's a tangle that defies easy untangling, a shadow play where every light cast reveals new darkness. And so, as we sift through these contradictions, we prepare to step into the official investigative findings and the FBI's behavioral analysis report, where the government lays out its authoritative closure on motive and the sole perpetrator theory. In the shadow of the official narrative, where the FBI and local authorities pinned the horror on a single man acting alone, without a whisper of motive, there linger these stubborn alternatives, theories that twist like smoke through the cracks of certainty, refusing to dissipate even years later. They emerge from the chaos of that October night, fueled by the raw echoes of panic and the relentless hum of doubt. Let's peel them back, one layer at a time, starting with the notion that Stephen Paddock wasn't flying solo. Witnesses and independent analysts have long claimed that the auditory texture of the gunfire suggested multiple shooters, with bursts coming from different directions, overlapping in a cacophony that no single rifle could produce. Amid the neon glow of a Las Vegas strip, where the air was thick with the scent of cordite and fear, concertgoers scrambled in the dust, their ears ringing from what sounded like a crossfire symphony. Not a lone melody. This discrepancy gnaws at the edges of the lone gunman's story, implying a coordinated assault that official reports have dismissed. Yet it plants seeds of suspicion that grow wild in the minds of those who lived through the terror. Early police radio dispatches crackled with reports of multiple shooters and vehicles fleeing the scenes, words that painted a picture of accomplices slipping into the night like ghosts. In the frantic hours after the first shots, as sirens wailed through the desert chill and officers barked coordinates over static-laced channels, these dispatches captured the raw confusion of a city under siege. Such fragments challenged the tidy conclusion of isolation, suggesting a web of involvement that investigators later unraveled as mere miscommunication, though for many, they remain threads pulling at the fabric of truth. Citizen videos and amateur analyses, often spearheaded by figures like John Cullen, pored over footage frame by frame, arguing that the patterns of fire and fleeing shadows pointed to hidden hands at work. From dimly lit home offices across the country, where screens flickered with grainy clips amid the quiet hum of late-night scrutiny, these independent sleuths dissected the evidence with a fervor born of disbelief. Their conclusions, contrary to the LVMPD and federal team's findings, of no ballistic or surveillance evidence for another shooter, fuel a narrative of cover-up that resonates deeply with the public weary of official assurances. Then there's the shadow of foreign intrigue, the theory that ties the massacre to a botched assassination attempt on Saudi royals, amplified by the temporal coincidence with the Saudi anti-corruption purge in November 2017. As Riyadh's palaces echoed with the arrests of princes and power brokers under the guise of reform, whispers spread online about unverified claims of Saudi elites vacationing at Mandalay Bay that fateful night. In the digital ether, where rumors swirled like desert sandstorms, social media threads wove tales of geopolitical hit jobs gone awry, transforming the senseless shooting into an international chess game. Yet, with no verified evidence placing any Saudi royals at the hotel on October 1st, 2017, this theory hangs on speculation alone, a seductive mirage that explains the inexplicable by invoking hidden global agendas. It is this absence of concrete ties that exposes the fragility of the official timeline, leaving room for doubts that fester like untreated wounds in the collective psyche. Shifting to institutional failures, narratives of MGM security lapses and timeline discrepancies have fueled civil lawsuits alleging negligence and obfuscation in the resort's handling of the event. Within the opulent halls of Mandalay Bay, where surveillance cameras hummed ceaselessly and security logs noted every anomaly, discrepancies in response times emerged, painting a portrait of corporate complacency amid rising chaos. These claims, pursued by victims and survivors in courtrooms heavy with grief and accusation, imply a broader failure of guardianship, where profit margins eclipsed human safety in the glittering facade of Sin City. Official investigations, from the LVMPD to federal probes, found no corroborated evidence supporting these alternative theories. Multiple shooters, foreign plots, or deliberate cover-ups all dissolved under scrutiny. In the sterile conference rooms of law enforcement agencies, surrounded by stacks of reports and the faint scent of printer ink, experts sifted through data that consistently pointed back to one man, one room, one arsenal. Still, these narratives persist, compelling because they offer structure to the senseless, a villainous plot to replace the void of motive, drawing in survivors who seek answers in the fog of trauma and a public disillusioned with authority. They remind us that in the noir underbelly of truth, doubt is the eternal companion, whispering alternatives that, verified or not, shape how we remember the night the music died. In the dim glow of my office lamp, surrounded by stacks of yellowed reports and half-empty coffee mugs that carry the bitter scent of endless nights, I find myself circling back to the questions that refuse to fade. We've traced the fallout from that fateful night, the lawsuits grinding through courtrooms thick with the murmur of whispered arguments, the regulatory shifts that echo like distant thunder in policy halls. But now, as the shadows lengthen, it's time to confront the voids in the official record, the unanswered riddles that keep the skeptics awake, their minds churning in the quiet hours before dawn. Take the absence of a motive, that glaring hole at the heart of it all. Despite federal agents combing through Stephen Paddock's life with the precision of surgeons dissecting a cadaver, no manifesto emerged, no grudge or ideology to pin the horror on. Just a man who amassed an arsenal in silence, his intentions as inscrutable as a fog-shrouded alley in the dead of night. It was October 2017, in a Las Vegas pulsing with the neon hum of perpetual revelry, where the air tasted of desert dust and distant rain. And investigators sifted through bank records and emails under the relentless glare of fluorescent lights, yet they surfaced empty-handed. The why of it all slipping through their fingers like smoke from a forgotten cigarette. This void doesn't just perplex, it undermines the very foundation of understanding mass violence, leaving us to wonder if the official closure is merely a bandage over a wound that festers with unspoken truths, inviting endless speculation in online forums where voices clash like thunder in a storm. Then there's the timeline, that tangled web of revisions and dispatch logs that shifted like sands in the Nevada wind. Initially, reports placed security guard Jesus Campos confronting Paddock before the barrage on the crowd, but revisions pushed it after, with inconsistencies in radio chatter that echoed through the chaos of flashing lights and panicked screams. Amid the acrid smell of gunfire lingering in the hotel corridors, where the echoes of bullets mingled with the distant wail of sirens racing through the strip's glittering haze, officials adjusted their accounts multiple times, each change stirring the pot of doubt in a city already reeling from the blood on its streets. Such discrepancies erode trust like rust on an old revolver, suggesting not just human error, but perhaps a deliberate veil, fueling theories that the sequence of events hides a larger orchestration, one that challenges the narrative of a solitary madman. Compounding this, are the delays and redactions in body cam and surveillance footage released in piecemeal fashion long after the dust settled, with black bars obscuring faces and timestamps that left more questions than clarity, as if the truth were being doled out in shadowed backrooms. In the sterile glow of evidence rooms, where the hum of projectors cast flickering images on walls stained by years of grim revelations, journalists and families waited months for glimpses that arrived censored, the withheld details hanging heavy in the air like unspoken accusations. This opacity isn't mere bureaucracy. It sows seeds of conspiracy, whispering that transparency is a luxury denied when powerful interests are at stake. And in doing so, it perpetuates a cycle of mistrust that gnaws at the public's faith in justice. And consider the geopolitical coincidence of the Saudi purge, unfolding mere weeks after the shooting, with high-profile arrests that rippled through palaces scented with incense and intrigue, linking back to the Mandalay Bay's ownership ties and whispers of royal guests that night. Against the backdrop of a Middle Eastern autumn heavy with the tension of shifting alliances, where the desert wines carried rumors of power plays amid the opulence of Riyadh's marble halls, this timing raised eyebrows, connecting dots across oceans in ways that official reports dismissed with a shrug. It's a alignment that defies simple chance, prodding us to question if global machinations intersected with that night of terror. Broadening the lens from a lone shooter to a web of international shadows that demand scrutiny. Survivors and forensic analysts, their voices rising in community halls, thick with the shared weight of trauma and unresolved grief, continue to ask why, challenging the official closure with pointed inquiries that echo like unanswered knocks on a locked door. In the years since, amid gatherings where the scent of fresh coffee mingles with the faint undercurrent of hospital antiseptic from lingering wounds, these groups pore over ballistics reports and witness accounts, their persistence a testament to pain that time hasn't dulled. Their unyielding pursuit implies that acceptance isn't closure. It highlights a systemic failure where voices from the ground clash with bureaucratic finality, urging a reevaluation of how we define truth in the aftermath of atrocity. Finally, the gaps in MGM and LVMPD records, those missing pages and withheld communications that linger like ghosts in the archives, sustain suspicion with their conspicuous absences, as if key pieces of the puzzle were swept under a rug dusted with casino glitter. Within the corporate towers overlooking the strip, where the air hums with the click of keyboards and the murmur of legal consultations, these omissions have fueled lawsuits and independent probes, each revelation pulling at threads in a tapestry woven tight with secrecy. Such voids don't just perplex, they corrode the pillars of accountability, reminding us that when records vanish, so does the public's right to know, leaving a legacy of doubt that shadows every official pronouncement. These unresolved threads weave a tapestry of skepticism, each one a loose end tugging at the seams of the official story. It's in these shadows that the real investigation continues, not in polished reports, but in the gritty pursuit of those who refuse to let the questions die. And as we stand on the brink of reflection, one anomaly stands out with glaring insistence: the swift dismissal of multiple shooter reports, a chorus of eyewitnesses whose accounts clash irreconcilably with the solitary figure painted by authorities. As the dust settles on this labyrinthine tale of the Las Vegas Massacre, we find ourselves at the precipice of what many call closure. Yet, in the dim glow of casino lights that never fully fade, true resolution feels like a gambler's elusive jackpot. The official record, that hefty tome compiled by federal agents and local law enforcement, painted a picture of a lone gunman with no discernible motive. A conclusion reached after months of scrutiny, but woven into its pages were shifting timelines that evolved like shadows lengthening at dusk. First reporting shots at one moment, then adjusting to another as new data emerged from the chaos. In the sweltering heat of that October night in 2017, amid the acrid smoke of gunfire and the distant wail of sirens cutting through the neon haze of the Strip, these timelines weren't just clerical errors. They were lifelines for survivors piecing together their nightmares. Such discrepancies whisper of deeper fractures in the narrative, suggesting that the rush to document horror in real time can distort the very truth it seeks to capture, leaving us to wonder if haste in the face of tragedy ever truly serves justice. Then there were the contested eyewitness and dispatch reports, accounts from frantic concert-goers and overtaxed responders that clashed with the polished official version. Some spoke of multiple shooters echoing across the festival grounds, while dispatches logged conflicting locations of threats in the immediate aftermath. The air that night was thick with panic, the ground littered with abandoned belongings under a sky indifferent to the bedlam below, where voices crackled over radios in a symphony of confusion. Each report a desperate attempt to make sense of senseless violence. These contradictions highlight the fragility of human perception under duress, reminding us that in the fog of mass trauma, what we see and hear can morph into myths that challenge the foundations of institutional trust. Despite an exhaustive federal review, one that pored over thousands of hours of footage, interviews, and forensic evidence in sterile government offices far removed from the blood-stained pavement, powerful alternative narratives have taken root and flourished. In the years since, online forums buzzed with speculation under the harsh light of computer screens, while books and documentaries dissected the event in hushed tones. All amid a socio-political climate rife with distrust toward authority, where every coincidence felt like a conspiracy waiting to be unveiled. This persistence reveals how exhaustive efforts, no matter how thorough, can falter against the tide of public skepticism, especially when the scale of the tragedy amplifies every anomaly into a potential cover-up. And here lies the central question that gnaws at the edges of this case. Why does the conclusion of a lone gunman with no motive rest on an official record riddled with these anomalies? Anomalies that no amount of explanation seems to fully erase? In the quiet aftermath, as families gathered in memorial services scented with fresh flowers and lingering grief, and analysts pored over documents in dimly lit rooms, heavy with the weight of unanswered queries, this question echoes through the corridors of doubt. It's a query that probes the heart of our societal unease, illustrating how incomplete disclosures and legal constraints can transform chaos into a breeding ground for endless speculation, eroding the very trust we need to heal. Amid all this, there's a persistent demand for transparency from survivors, litigants, and analysts alike. Voices rising like a chorus in courtrooms and public forums, insisting on fuller releases of evidence that could quiet the storm of uncertainty. These demands play out against a backdrop of ongoing lawsuits and vigils, where the scent of courtroom polish mixes with the raw emotion of those forever changed. In an era where information flows freely, yet official gates remain stubbornly locked. Such calls underscore the institutional challenges in balancing transparency with the necessities of investigation. Yet they also affirm that without it, doubt festers, turning tragedy into a perpetual shadow over collective memory. Reflecting on the scale and trauma of the shooting, the shifting narratives intertwined with socio-political coincidences, it's clear how fertile the ground became for alternative theories. Each inconsistency, like a mismatched bullet casing in an otherwise tidy crime scene, invites scrutiny that the official story struggles to withstand. Institutions, bound by chaos and legal constraints, face towering hurdles in providing answers that satisfy a public hungry for unvarnished truth. Their efforts, often lost in the din of misinformation and grief-fueled anger. So why does powerful doubt persist despite the exhaustive investigations? It speaks volumes about how society processes mass tragedy, grappling with truth and trust in an age where every detail is dissected under the microscope of social media and skepticism. In the end, as we close this chapter, let us underline the importance of forensic rigor and empathetic listening in our ongoing efforts to understand and memorialize this event. For only through such diligence can we hope to bridge the chasms of doubt and honor the lives forever altered. And yet, the questions linger, inviting us all to keep probing the darkness, because in the world of dark investigations, truth is not a destination. It's a pursuit that demands our unwavering vigilance.